2022 has been a shocking year for UFC fans, with 2 title fight upsets. Israel Adesanya lost to longtime rival Alex Pereira in a shock upset at UFC 281. Izzy has been knocked out once in his career, and that was against Pereira back when they were both kickboxing. In this video, we'll be talking about what this rivalry is all about, and what's next for the 2 fighters. First off, let's talk about this rivalry. The UFC knew exactly what they were doing when they signed Alex "Powhatan" Pereira to the roster. The Brazilian has for years been talked about as the guy that knocked out Izzy, but there's a lot more to the fighter than that. Pereira is a well-renowned kickboxer who fights at middleweight, but honestly, he's big enough to be a heavyweight. That's what's always been so scary about Powhatan, his massive frame and his gigantic fists. He's always had freakish knockout power, and he's now shown that against Izzy, not once, but twice. Izzy and Alex have been exchanging words for years before this insane upset win for Pereira. Even when Alex hadn't yet been signed by the UFC, interviewers would always ask Izzy about the Brazilian. He even went on record to say that he couldn't wait to shut everyone up, and that he was relishing the opportunity for a fight with Alex in the UFC. On Pereira's side, the Brazilian has always talked about how he wishes to expose Adesanya and prove that his 2 wins over him back in their kickboxing days were no flukes. Since Alex signed with the UFC late last year, all the talk has been about him and Izzy facing off in the near future. Well, he ran right through his first 3 opponents in the UFC, knocking out 2 of them, including Sean Strickland. This paved the way for Powhatan to face Izzy at UFC 281. Next, what happened at UFC 281? With the storyline fully in motion, Pereira and Adesanya were set to face off at UFC 281. The rivalry has been brewing for the past 6 years. It was finally time for the verdict on who is the better fighter. Israel Adesanya came into the fight as a favorite to win, but those odds are always taken with a pinch of salt anyway. This was the first time the pair were facing off in an MMA setting, with the advantage obviously going to Adesanya because of his experience in the UFC. The fight started off as many expected it to, with Izzy dominating very clearly. He even had Pereira rocked on his feet in the final seconds of the first round, but the bell came to the Brazilian's rescue. For the majority of the fight, Izzy dominated Pereira with his limited but sufficient grappling game. Alex looked like a fish out of water every time the pair took it to the ground, understandably because of his roots in kickboxing. Everything was going according to plan for Izzy, that is, till a monster left hook hit him flush in round 5. The next couple of seconds after that were hard to watch for all of Adesanya's fans, as he ate a flurry of punches till the fight was stopped. Coming up, what's next for the rivalry? If there's any fighter that deserves an immediate rematch for the belt, it's Israel Adesanya. Given the fact that he almost equaled Anderson Silva's title defense record, it's easy enough to say that Izzy was a historic champion. Even though he's now 0-3 against Pereira, the case for the rematch is very much there. Israel even said that he's the kind of person to show up outside Alex's house even at the age of 60. The fans know exactly what a close fight it was, and even if it is 3-0 in Pereira's favor, the rivalry is definitely active. The MMA world was in shock when the fight got announced in the first place, with Alex only having 3 wins under his belt in the UFC. Alex Pereira is now the UFC's middleweight champion, and Izzy has already indicated that he's coming to get his belt back no matter what. It's going to be interesting to see what game plans Izzy and Pereira bring to the rematch after learning from UFC 281. There were definitely some holes in Pereira's game plan, as Izzy dominated the first 4 rounds of the fight, and would have won on points if not for the comeback. After the fight, both fighters were respectful to each other, but Pereira even apologized for his trash talking during the build-up. The new champ said that he was sorry for saying everything he did, and that at the end of the day, he has nothing but respect for Adesanya and always has. Next, Chris Curtis believes he has the best solution for Izzy going into the rematch. Fellow middleweight Chris Curtis joked about the Adesanya and Pereira rematch, and thinks that the only way to beat Pereira for Izzy is to poison him. At that point, you just have to poison him, because you can't defeat him in one-on-one combat, so we gotta do the gladiator thing and stab him or poison him before the fight. Fellow UFC middleweight Chris Curtis told Helen Yee. Curtis spoke about how he'd be pretty mad if the same guy had just kept hounding him all these years. He also felt like Izzy feels the same way, but won't ever let it show. Curtis went on to say that he even feels bad for Izzy. After being on top for so long in the UFC, it just had to be a former rival that beat Adesanya, and honestly, that's gotta hurt. For years, years, Izzy's been dogged by the press and fans regarding his 2 losses to Powhatan, and now Pereira has only come back and done it again. As a fighter, it's gotta sting, knowing that you have your own personal boogeyman coming after you, according to Curtis. He made a good point about how demoralizing it must be to lose out at the last second like Izzy has to Pereira, winning the entirety of the fight only to be socked in the last few minutes. Izzy has now lost twice in this manner to Alex, which has got to hurt him mentally. Izzy has the heart and mind of a champion, and we saw that as he came onto Andrew Schultz's podcast only days after the loss. He was joking around and talking about how he's gonna be back soon enough. Coming up next, Maria Bustamante explained the path Pereira should take from here. New to the UFC and now a first-time UFC champion, Alex Pereira needs all the guidance he can get. Powhatan already surrounds himself with great influences, namely his fellow Brazilian and former UFC champion Glover Teixeira. After his win, the UFC's first ever Brazilian champion offered some words of wisdom for Pereira. Bustamante said he was very happy that the belt was back in a Brazilian's hands, but had some advice for Pereira as well. The UFC legend wants Pereira to work hard on his ground game in order to get far in this division. Notably, Pereira struggled the most when on the mat with Izzy. This raises a lot of questions as to how dominant Alex can be as a champion, knowing that Adesanya isn't the best at grappling himself either. Apart from that, Bustamante had nothing but praise for the 35-year-old champion. The UFC veteran commended Pereira's heart to come back in the last round after losing the entire fight. Alex's mental game is rock solid, and he showcased it against Israel Adesanya for the second time at UFC 281. The champ will have to brush up on some more aspects of his game though, as MMA has a lot more to it than just standing and banging. The Brazilian has extreme knockout power, but needs other tools that he can rely on as well. Finally, Izzy wants the rematch to be a bloodbath. Adesanya spoke about the anticipated rematch only days after losing his belt. Izzy said he wants the rematch to be a bloodbath. For his past couple of fights, Izzy has had to hear a lot of noise from fans, saying that he wasn't exciting anymore. Well, we're sure he heard you guys loud and clear, because he wants the rematch to be an all-out war between him and Pereira. It's understandable that he feels robbed after his loss, especially since he was dominating the fight until the end. Even though there's a fierce rivalry fueling Izzy's comments, perhaps taking Pereira on in a straightforward brawl isn't the best idea. Both of Izzy's KO losses against Alex have come from situations where he decided to stand and throw the kitchen sink at him. Pereira is an elite striker, but at the moment he doesn't have any other layers to his fighting style. It would make more sense for Izzy to take Alex to the ground and keep him there, exploiting Pereira's lack of MMA experience. Adesanya probably would have won their recent fight had he opted to avoid standing and banging with Alex in the final round. That's it for today's video. Let's see what happens in the rematch. Do you think Izzy will get his belt back, or are we about to see Powhatan start a dominant run at the top of the UFC? Let us know in the comments below, and leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Be sure to subscribe to our channel if you want to see more MMA content just like this. See you next time.